Joey was a 23-year-old young man who loved going on walks. One day, Joey was walking around his neighborhood when he noticed a man staring at him, smiling in the distance. And it wasn't just a smile, it was the worst smile you've ever seen. Joey ignored the man and kept walking, but noticed two other people staring and smiling at him. Joey was so confused and thought they were laughing at him, but as he got closer, he noticed the smile on their faces was extremely sinister. At this point, Joey was scared and started walking faster. But things kept getting stranger. Every person Joey walked by was staring at him with a chilling smile on their faces. Joey began to run, but everyone began running after him with the smile still on their faces. As Joey approached his house, a pack of smiling people followed. Joey then woke up in a pool of sweat in his bed. He then turned over to check his phone when he noticed something in the corner of his room. He stared in fear as a man with a smile on his face looked at him.
This woman killed her daughter by feeding her Mountain Dew. Tamara Brooks is a 41-year-old woman from Ohio. In January 2022, her 4-year-old daughter tragically passed away. Tamara and her partner reportedly found their daughter unresponsive on the 21st of January. They rang an ambulance and the child was raced to hospital. She sadly didn't make it. When she was examined post-mortem, it was discovered that she died from severe malnutrition and suffered diabetes-related complications. She had been fed Mountain Dew through a baby bottle, and the child's teeth were actually rotting so badly that she barely had any teeth left. The child had never been taken to a dentist, and Tamara was said to have mixed baby formula with fizzy drinks. Tamara pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and has been sentenced to 9 years in prison. The child's dad, Christopher Hobe, has also been charged with his daughter's death. He will be sentenced next month. Horrifically, this is not Tamara's only child, and certainly not the only child to have suffered in her care. Her son fell into a coma when he was 4 years old from undiagnosed diabetes. Tamara then failed to take him to follow-up appointments with doctors.
This depraved pedophile just couldn't stop committing crimes. This is 66-year-old Karamat Mansourabadi. So Karamat is from Wisconsin, and in 2023, February 2023 to be exact, reports came in that he had assaulted a child. Obviously, the police wanted to follow this up. They went to his home, they conducted an interview, and they felt like that was enough evidence to arrest Karamat. So he was arrested for the essay of a child, but he was then let out of jail. But something that investigators didn't know is that they had found even more evidence when they searched his property. You see, in February of 2023, when investigating the essay claim, they took Karamat's cell phone into evidence. But it was a few months later when they actually started going through the cell phone when they found some disturbing evidence. On Karamat's cell phone, they found over 30 CP or CSAM images that he had downloaded from the dark web. So he was then rearrested, brought back into custody, and his bail was then set at $1.8 million, ensuring that he wouldn't be able to leave jail until his trial. So the sentencing, the trial hasn't happened here yet, but I really hope that this guy gets put away for a very extended period of time.
You ever heard about like creepypastas and shit like that? I'm pretty sure.
Of course, yeah.
So there was a 13-year-old boy, right, who moved into a new town with his mother. He was used to getting bullied and stuff, like really, really bad and shit. In his new school, whatever, he was still getting bullied. But it got too extreme, bro. Like these kids were like, that ass hurt this mother. Right? This time it got too crazy to the point where like they lit him on fire and they threw bleach on his face. His eyelids got like up, but he has no eyelids. He basically woke up in the hospital, right? He looked into the mirror and he saw his new face and he just started laughing like manically. Yeah. And he was saying like, I love my new face.
Yeah, that was probably him like literally being at that breaking point and just snapping. Like he was already getting bullied and shit.
And then he purposely carved like a permanent smile on his face.
Is his name Jeff?
Yeah.
As soon as you said like bleach on his face and it got fucked up, yeah, Jeff the Killer's face like popped up. But do you think like there's a real life person that was like that? Maybe like their face got destroyed and like they looked at their face and like started laughing because like, yo, I fucking love my face now.
I mean, we know that there are deranged, crazy people.
Yeah,
in the
for
world,
sure.
And a situation like that could literally either make you like completely depressed and sad and want to like just be completely on some. I'm already gonna get looked at as crazy and shit. I might as well just completely envelop that character.
It's basically what he did, and then he ended up one by one started getting revenge on all of them, and he killed them, bro.
You remember the JPEG one?
JPEG.
With the dog?
The smiling dog?
Yeah, cursed picture of the dog. I think it was like a JPEG or like a regular attachment sent to somebody on their laptop, and they just...
Chablis was the manager of a farm that all of his friends worked on, and one day they all got into a very big argument. And a couple days after the argument, these so-called friends did the unthinkable. They all went to where Chablis was at and then kidnapped him and asked him for money from his parents. Chablis' parents ended up giving them money, and his friends, the kidnappers, assured them that Chablis would be home safely by the morning. But that did not happen. They ended up killing Chablis and then cooked his flesh and meat and ate him since Chablis saw their faces. The police interrogated many suspects, and one of them confessed and showed them the area where Chablis was killed. Police searched the area and found Chablis' bone fragments and skull. Yu Meng Chung Marma was arrested as the mastermind behind the murder, and when he was taken to the crime scene, an angry mob of villagers surrounded the police car and pulled him out. They all then savagely lynched him to death. It turns out Yu Meng killed Chablis before even contacting his parents for money, which makes it that much worse. This case is just sickening, and it's crazy what people would do for money, especially to their own friends. May Chablis rest in peace. You did not deserve this at all.
I do have a case about a real life Frogger too. This case is called the Denver Spider-Man. His name was Theodore Conies or Conies. He had a pretty rough childhood too. Doctors would say that he wouldn't live to see 18 because he had like a medical conditions and stuff like that. He was homeless for most of his adult life. So time passes. When he goes to this house from his old friend, his original plan was to just go steal money and steal food. But when he went, like nobody was home and the door was unlocked. And as he was looking through everything, he saw a hole that led to a secret room in the attic. Him being skinny, he fit through the hole. He made himself through the attic, and for the next 5 weeks, he was staying at the crib. And he only went down whenever they were sleeping, or whenever they were out. He would only come down to get food and then go back up.
Living like a rat.
Within those 5 weeks, on October, he thought that the guy was out, but he was snapping somewhere, and he was going through the fridge making noise, and the guy ended up waking up. A fight ensued. He ended up killing him. But after killing him, instead of fleeing the scene, he just cleaned the murder weapons and went back up to the attic and just stood there. And when the cops arrived, they searched everywhere, but they couldn't find no evidence. And they saw the hole too, but they didn't think a man could fit through there, so they just let it be. And he stood there for the next, I think all the way to July, bro.
God damn.
How do niggas not realize things going missing?
Yeah, like
things being
In my opinion, this is like the most notorious place in this entire country. The Ancient Ram Inn. It's in this pit where they found the skeletal remains of children who were sacrificed.
It's not the sort of place I want to live.
It's a foreboding place. It is the most evil house I've had the misfortune to visit.
My father, he was a devout Baptist minister when he moved in. He was tapped by incubus, the sex demon.
Satanic rituals were performed here.
People have been using it for curses.
This place, every time you walk in, I mean, I wouldn't spend the night here on my own. It's supposed to be linked to the devil, basically. It's a sex demon.
There, the triangular marks, what they call a witch's mark, to ward off evil spirits. I'm not joking, he possesses people in here. You really have to be careful.
There's the reports of a person who was killed by having his face pressed into the open fire.
So that's where I don't live here now. It's more than just a little things moving. It's got this place has got personality.
Gangbang. What the?
Kissing. There's something's messing with my legs, man.
This is Lucy Letby, a 33-year-old nurse who's just been accused of murdering 7 infants and attempting to kill 10 more. This is what we know so far. Lucy was a nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital in Chester, England. Dating back to 2015, a doctor at the hospital started noticing unusual and unexplainable things happening in the neonatal unit, such as multiple infants either collapsing or dying. Sometimes this would happen in just the span of a month. During that time, Nurse Lucy would be assigned to the infants and working. But suspicions really didn't start until April of 2016, when a 6-week premature boy, referred to as Child M, suddenly stopped breathing and collapsed. Doctors spent 25 minutes resuscitating him via CPR and giving him multiple doses of adrenaline. Luckily, he was stabilized and placed on a ventilator. However, the doctor on call noticed bright pink blotches on the infant's torso that would appear and disappear. And once he was stabilized, they completely vanished. It wasn't known at the time, but oxygen had actually been injected into the baby's bloodstream. Lucy was the assigned nurse to take care of him that evening, and she noted that the infant was experiencing symptoms similar to that of the brain being starved of oxygen. But later brain scans determined that that wasn't true. Just hours later, Child M's twin brother, referred to as Child L, also collapsed and started to deteriorate after Nurse Lucy was assigned to him. And like his brother, Child L had also been attacked, but this time he was injected with a dose of insulin. Luckily, both brothers survived, but this prompted a doctor at the hospital to begin an investigation into what was happening. And to his surprise, he discovered multiple infant deaths at the hospital consistent with air embolism dating back to 2015, and Lucy was at the center of it all. Lucy was arrested in 2018, and shortly after, authorities found multiple post-it notes in her home in which she had written things like, quote, "I am evil," and "I killed them on purpose," end quote. Lucy is facing 22 charges and has been accused of killing 7 infants and attempting to kill 10 more. It was reported that she used various methods to harm the infants, like injecting them with oxygen and insulin, but also feeding them an excessive amount of milk. Lucy has since pleaded not guilty, and the case remains ongoing.
The man who played Troy McClure in The Simpsons was brutally murdered, and no one believed it until they got proof. Phil Hartman had a distinctive voice. He was well known for playing numerous Simpsons characters, such as Troy McClure, Lionel Hutz, and the man who was selling the monorail. He played loads of characters on show SNL and had roles in numerous films. He married his first wife, Gretchen Lewis, in 1970, and the pair got divorced just 2 years after. He then married again to Lisa Strain in 1982. He then again got divorced. In 1987, he married his third wife, former model Bryn Omdahl. They'd met on a blind date and he was infatuated with her. The pair had 2 children together, but the marriage had its challenges. Bryn was jealous of Phil's success and also extremely jealous of his exes. She once sent a very threatening letter to his ex-wife saying that she would rip her eyes out. She started drinking heavily and using substances, and although she had dreams of becoming an actress, she just couldn't live up to Phil's success. She ended up going to rehab several times. She would often have violent outbursts, and Phil was quite often terrified for the safety of his children. Now, interestingly, Phil actually became close friends with Joe Rogan, who did try and convince him to get a divorce. Unfortunately, though, he stuck with his wife, which proved to be fatal. On the 28th of May 1998, Bryn went to a restaurant to have drinks with a producer and a writer. After she got home, her and Phil had a heated argument before going to bed. Before 3 a.m, Bryn entered the room where Phil was sleeping after she had taken substances and been drinking. She shot him 3 times with a handgun. Still high, she drove to her friend's house where she told him that she'd killed her husband. Now, he actually didn't believe her, and he asked her to come with him back to the house so that he could confirm this. They drove to the house, and when he obviously saw Phil's body, he knew she was telling the truth. After finding Phil's body, he rang police. By the time officers had got to the property, Bryn had locked herself in the bedroom. She then unalived herself with the same weapon that she used on her husband. After the passing of both of their parents, the pair's children were looked after by Bryn's sister Catherine and her husband.
Courage the Cowardly Dog. There was only certain times when I feel like the villains or the characters in there were just too creepy.
For me, it was majority of them, I'm not gonna lie.
There was also this one where episode, like some creepy ass guy with a weird ass smile tormented
Courage?
Yeah, you don't remember? He had like a weird ass smile. Still to this day, if I watch it, it kind of gives me a weird ass vibe, creepy vibe. Name of the episode is Freaky Fred. If I show you the picture of the character or the villain, you're gonna know who it is. Do you remember him?
Yeah, bro.
Do you remember what he said though? What was his famous line?
I remember seeing this motherfucker, but I don't remember the episode.
So supposedly this is Muriel's nephew, and he's a freaky barber, according to Eustace, right? And he's just this really weird like character who is obsessed with hair, but he's also obsessed with being naughty. But the way he says it
sounds like a predator way, or
yeah, it sounds mad fucking weird, bro, and it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Hello, new friend. My name is Fred. The words you hear are in my head, and I've been very naughty.
And he becomes very, very obsessed with
courage,
and he wants to cut his hair off.
The look upon my young love's face was sweet as lace.
Poor Courage, bro. I'll be feeling so bad for Courage.
I realized she...
That one episode is the one that freaked me out the most and shit like that. But it was actually inspired.
This 18-year-old model was murdered, and you won't believe what her killer said. This is Sally Ann Bowman, and she was born on September 11th, 1987, in Carshalton, South London. She attended the Brit School for Performing Arts and Technology in Croydon. Sally Bowman had dreams of one day appearing on the cover of Vogue and had been compared to supermodel Kate Moss. After leaving school in 2004, she worked part-time as a hairdresser and model. In January 2005, she joined Post Model Management, a local modeling agency, and she became the face of Swatch Watches and took part in the Swatch Alternative Fashion Week in April 2005. But in September of that year, her life would drastically change forever. On the night of September 24th, 2005, Sally Bowman and her older sister Nicole and a group of friends went to Lloyd's Bar in Croydon, where they stayed until 1 a.m. After leaving the bar, Sally Bowman waited outside for 15 minutes before being taken to her friend's house by taxi. She contacted her ex-boyfriend Lewis Sproatston, and he agreed to pick her up and take her home, after she told him Nicole had been arrested for fighting. She took a taxi back to Croydon Town Central, where Sproatston picked her up around 2 a.m., but while in the car, Sally and her ex-boyfriend got into a fight and they accused the other of infidelity, which had been contributed to their recent split. Shortly after 4 a.m., Sally left the car and Lewis drove off. Minutes later, Sally was then stabbed in the neck and stomach and was then raped as she lay dead or dying on the ground. Her handbag, cardigan, and underwear and mobile phone were stolen. Police initially treated Lewis as a suspect and he was then arrested. After being held for 4 days, DNA evidence eliminated him as a suspect and he was released without charge. On June 28, 2006, 35-year-old Croydon man Mark Dixie was arrested on suspicion of murdering Sally. He was charged with Sally's murder and remained in custody to await trial. This development came after police discovered a DNA link to the murder, having taken a DNA swab from Dixie when they arrested him 2 weeks earlier for allegedly being involved in a brawl at a bar, where he was working as a chef. After more than 18 months in custody, Mark Dixie went on trial at the Old Bailey in the City of London on February 4, 2008, charged with the murder of Sally Ann Bowman. He admitted to having sex with her after finding her on the ground outside her home, but denied murdering her and said that he did not realize she was dead or dying when he found her, which is just sickening because we all know he did it and what he did to her. Mark Dixie was then found guilty of Sally Bowman's murder by anonymous verdict on February 22, 2008 after 3 hours of jury deliberation. The judge sentenced Mark Dixie to life in prison with a minimum of 34 years, meaning that he is unlikely to be considered for parole until at least 2040. It was also revealed that Mark Dixie was already a convicted serial sex offender. This case is just so chilling and sad because Sally Bowman had dreams of becoming a model and just doing something good with her life. And that went all out the door because this mentally unstable man had other plans. She was just 18 years old with her whole life ahead of her. May she rest in peace.
Something really sinister happened to 25-year-old Rasheem Carter, and we need to talk about it. In October of last year, Rasheem went to the Taylorsville Police Department in Mississippi and told them that he was being stalked and threatened by a group of white men and that he feared for his life, only to be turned away. He would then disappear that very same day, and his body would be found in a deeply wooded area 1 month later. Rasheem was a contract worker who had recently been placed at the Georgia Pacific plant in Taylorsville, Mississippi. He had roomed up with another contract worker at the Super 8 motel in Laurel, which is roughly 30 miles away from the job site. His car had recently broken down, so his coworker was taking him to and from work since they were going to the same site. But on October 1st, 2022, a disagreement had taken place, and his roommate wouldn't take him back to the motel and left without him. Shortly after, Rasheem called his mom in a panic and told her that he had basically been chased into a family dollar store in Taylorsville and was being threatened by 3 trucks full of white men who wanted to hurt him. He then told her, quote, "If something bad happens to me, start here." End quote. His mom told him to try and go to the Taylorsville Police Department for help and to wait it out, and once there, Rasheem told the police what happened and that he feared for his life. He also asked them if they could possibly give him a ride back to the Super 8 motel, but they told him no because it was out of their jurisdiction and in another county. It's not known where Rasheem slept that night, but early the next morning, he once again went to the Taylorsville Police Department and told them that he was being stalked and threatened by a group of white men and that he feared for his life. He pleaded for their help, but once again, they turned him away. After leaving, Rasheem called his mom, and one of the last things that he said to her was, quote, "Mom, I'm smart. I'm not crazy." End quote. His mom, not living close by, tried her best to calm him down and tried to have someone pick him up, but he disappeared shortly after that, and he would be missing for 1 month until his remains would be found. On November 1st, the Smith County Sheriff's Office called Rashim's mom and asked her if she could identify an image caught on a hunter's video in a deeply wooded area. The video reportedly showed a man running, and after looking at it, Rashim's mom confirmed it was him. Authorities began searching the area, and 1 day later, Rashim's body was found at the deer park off of Highway 37, which is 1 mile south of Taylorsville. From what I can find, an official cause of death has not been released, but there is one article that says he was possibly dismembered. But again, from what I can find, that has not been confirmed. Since Rashim didn't have a car, the location in which his body was found just doesn't make sense to a lot of people unless he was purposefully taken there. His body was then taken to the Mississippi Crime Lab, but not long after, authorities put out a statement that no foul play was suspected. Rashim's family has absolutely been put through the ringer in trying to find out what happened to their son. And sadly, it's been reported that Taylorsville, Mississippi is known for its hostility towards people of color, and many activists recommend avoiding it. What really happened to Rashim Carter? His family deserves answers.
The mother of the Uvalde school shooter was arrested last year after making death threats herself. And this seems to be an alarming pattern of behavior in this family. So if you don't remember, in 2022, this man went into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and opened fire, killing 21 people altogether, 19 young children and 2 teachers. This was one of the most horrific events to ever really happen here in the United States. It sent shockwaves around the world. And those 21 students and teachers that lost their lives that day will never be forgotten. But in January of 2023, Salvador Ramos, the shooter's mother, Adriana Reyes, spent 2 nights in jail for threatening to murder her disabled partner that she lived with. Apparently, the man that she was dating stated that he felt terrified and felt like she could kill him at any second, and that's why he called the police to report her. Now, initially she tried to claim that this never happened, but somebody who was a witness to these threats, who actually heard her screaming these death threats, corroborated the story with the police, and she was arrested. And if you'll remember, Salvador Ramos's cousin actually threatened to do the same thing as his cousin, aka he threatened to commit another shooting last year as well. And needless to say, I think that there's just something wrong here. This week on our podcast, my wife Courtney and I are starting our series about the Uvalde school shooting. Our podcast is called Murder in America, and we're going through everything that led up to this, the police failures, the massacre itself, and obviously everything that happened afterwards.
This woman killed her best friend after being promised $9 million from a man who was catfishing her online. Denali Bremer met 19-year-old Cynthia Hoffman in school and by all accounts were best friends. But in the summer of 2019, then 18-year-old Denali met a man online who called himself Tyler. Tyler told Denali that he was a millionaire living in Kansas, and they quickly began their online relationship as Denali lived in Alaska. The two began planning multiple crimes together in exchange for money, which included a rape and murder of someone living in Alaska. Tyler promised Denali $9 million if she were to send him pictures and videos of her murdering someone. And sadly, that's when she started planning the murder of her best friend Cynthia. Denali managed to rally 4 of her friends, then 16-year-old Caden McIntosh, Caleb Leyland, and 2 other juveniles who are currently unnamed to help her carry out the murder. She promised them all a large sum of money to help her kill Cynthia. So in June of 2019, Denali and Caden lured Cynthia to Thunderbird Falls in Chujiak, Alaska, pretending to go on a hike. Once there, they bound Cynthia's hands, feet, and mouth in duct tape and shot her in the back of the head, killing her. Denali filmed and took photos of the murder and then sent them to Tyler before dumping Cynthia's body in the river. The two destroyed her personal belongings and then texted her parents that they had dropped her off at a park. Cynthia was missing for 2 days before her body would eventually be found. During the investigation, it was revealed that the man Denali had been talking to online, who called himself Tyler, was actually a catfish named Darren Schillmiller who lived in Indiana. It wasn't long before Denali was arrested and indicted on charges of first-degree murder, first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree solicitation of murder, and tampering with physical evidence. However, she entered a deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, and in return, all of the other charges were dismissed. She's due back in court in August and is facing 30 to 99 years in prison. Darren, Caden, and Caleb were also all arrested. Darren was indicted on 5 murder counts, and the other 2 were indicted on 4 murder counts. Caden was also indicted on tampering with evidence. All 3 have pleaded not guilty and are awaiting trial. Cynthia's family believed that she was targeted because she had a learning disability that put her at a younger developmental age than 19. According to them, Cynthia had always just wanted to have friends, and sadly, she thought she found them.
Reports of a mysterious bearded man plagued a community after a schoolgirl vanished. When the truth was revealed, it was more horrific than the locals could ever have imagined. It was the 18th of November, 1993. Angie Hasman was in 4th grade, living in St. Louis in Missouri. It should have been a normal afternoon as Angie made her way off the school bus back home. Unfortunately, it was the last journey she would ever take. She vanished off the school bus just 8 houses away from her home. Tragically, her body was then discovered 9 days later by a deer hunter. Horrifically, she'd been tied to a tree alive and left there to die. Her autopsy, though, revealed something even more hideous. Experts revealed she'd been kept alive for an entire week and endured torture and before actually passing away. Now, forensic experts collected evidence from the crime scene. This was things such as a fingerprint on the duct tape left on Angie's body. They also collected a DNA profile from her underwear. Now, eyewitnesses reported seeing a mysterious bearded man around the area just prior to her disappearance. However, searches for the mystery bearded man proved fruitless. The case went frustratingly cold until 25 years later. Thanks to advances in DNA technology, in March 2019, a lab tested the DNA found in the case. They uploaded the profile to a national database, and this time they got a match. The culprit was 61-year-old Earl Webster Cox. He was local to the area at the time of Angie's disappearance and murder. Interestingly, he'd actually previously been dishonorably discharged from the Air Force due to S activity with 4 different children. He'd only had to spend 8 years in prison before he was released. He then moved to Missouri and was again arrested for child abuse in 1992. He also pleaded guilty in 2003 for trying to entice a child over state lines for S activity. He also pleaded guilty to having over 45,000 images of child SA on his computer. How this man was free to then SA and kill Angie is absolutely mind-boggling. After his DNA was found on Angie's underwear, he was charged with murder, kidnapping and sodomy. He pleaded guilty and was given life in prison.
The person you just saw in that video was Rachel Queen Burton, and Rachel was recently convicted for being a pedophile. So before Rachel was arrested, Rachel had over 34,000 followers on TikTok. And it was here on TikTok where Rachel posted a bunch of different videos just living life and basically existing. But then some disturbing allegations came forward, and Rachel was accused of repeatedly abusing 2 children, and then stalking the children's family and driving them into homelessness. So after the victim's mother found out about the abuse Rachel was perpetrating on the children, the mother went to the police, and the family was then moved into a police safe house. But it was even there in the safe house where Rachel stalked the family. The mother even said that Rachel approached the windows of the safe house and was peering in, searching for the children to abuse them. So eventually, investigators in Australia finally got search warrants and searched through Rachel's devices, and it was there where they discovered CP or CSAM materials. And recently, Rachel has been convicted of production and possession of CP materials, gross indecency, and indecent assault. Since this is all happening right now, I don't know if Rachel is going to be in prison for a very long time. It's always kind of a toss-up when it comes to other countries. But yeah, this is another just disgusting story, and the story of how you can't really trust anybody on social media. It's not like people like this are waving flags around saying, "I'm a pedophile."
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is why you should always lock your doors. 2 teenage girls were working the night shift at a Pizza Hut when they realized it was 11 o'clock, meaning that it was time to close up shop. They turned off the lights, locked the doors, and began to walk outside. But as they approached their car, they realized that there was an old lady sitting in the front passenger seat. One of the girls opened the driver's side door and asked the old woman, "Can I help you?" before getting in. To which she replied, "I just need a ride home." The girls then told her that they needed to go back inside to call their moms and tell them that they'd be late. They immediately ran back inside, locked the doors, and proceeded to call the police, who showed up about 10 minutes later and arrested her. As it turns out, it was actually a 47-year-old man dressed up like an old woman, and the police found drugs and a knife on his body.
I want to talk about this because I think it's important for as much information to be shared as possible, but there is an active serial killer operating in Stockton, California right now. He appears to be targeting Latino men walking alone late at night, and these are the areas that the 5 shootings this year happened in. But then 2 days ago, the Stockton police said 2 shootings last year were also done by the same person. This image is the only image that police have of him, but a woman who was shot last year and survived said that he's about 6 foot tall, was wearing a black mask and black clothing. So please, please, please help get word out about this, especially if you know any Latino men in Stockton, California right now. I'm going to show you the video that this clip is from, and it includes a phone number for any tips that anyone might have.
When the kidnapper made me guess where he kept my daughter, I went for the basement and he said, "Correct," allowing me to see her. But when I found her severed head in there, I learned that every other choice would have been correct as well. I told her there was no monster in my closet, as I picked her up and told her that she could sleep with us tonight. I figured that was the safest way of getting out of the house, without the man realizing that I saw him. All my life, my parents told me not to open the basement door, but I got curious and disobeyed them. What is that glowing ball in the sky? And why does it hurt my eyes?
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you a couple police sketches, and then we're going to see what the people looked like when they were actually caught. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff on this page, so make sure you follow along. Starting with this one. So this was a man who SA'd a minor, and this was the description that she gave to the police. And as you can see, this is really close. He has the big glasses that go up over his eyebrows, broad nose, really round face. Even the hairline is pretty similar. This is a woman who stole a baby from a maternity ward. And she was actually caught 10 hours after the sketch was released because she looks almost identical to it. So the witness who gave the description to the police officer for this one was actually intoxicated when he saw her. But that person basically got it identically correct. You can see her wispy bangs, super round face, the way that her hair comes down over the sides of her face. Even her eyebrow shape is perfect. These sketches were all done by a woman named Lois Gibson, who holds the Guinness World Record for most successful police sketch artist. She helped solve over 1,000 crimes in her 30-year career.
This is me after being released after 39 years in prison for a crime I never committed. I am Ricky Jackson, and in 1975 a robbery and murder occurred in a Cleveland store, in which a 13-year-old witness, Eddie Vernon, blamed me and other 2 men for being the protagonists of this act because he saw us in the area. He told them that I was the one that shot the victim, and unfortunately, they believed him. And at the age of 19, I was sentenced to death. But years later, something was discovered that would free me from this unjust sentence. My death sentence was postponed multiple times until 2014, when Eddie Vernon, who was now 52 years old, finally confessed the truth. He exposed that the police pressured him to give false evidence against me and the other 2 men to close the case. Thanks to this and other evidence, I was finally released and compensated with $1 million. Do you think that was enough to pay the 39 years?
Huge trigger warning for this video, which is one of the most disgusting UK news cases I think I've ever seen. Mark Whalley is a 71-year-old man from Manchester. At the end of last month, news broke of the horrors he had planned. The National Crime Agency had found Mark used websites to discuss his interest in children under 12 with others. Disgustingly, he'd shared explicit images with others and shared his own plans and wishes to perform hideous acts himself. Now, it was actually a tip-off from Norway that helped to catch this criminal in the act who was planning a hideous attack. Mark had spoken to someone online who claimed to have access to a 12-week-old baby. They agreed for Mark to use this child for his sickening plan. Mark arranged to meet this person at a hotel in Manchester city centre. He entered the hotel and attempted to board the lift. Officers intercepted him as he did so and detained him. He was arrested on suspicion of child abuse offences. Now, originally he had tried to claim that the officers were mistaken and he was simply meeting someone for an affair. He would eventually admit to his hideous crimes and pleaded guilty to making and distributing child P. He also confessed to arranging a child S offence and possession of extreme images. Mark's devices had already been found to have child P on them back in 2021. He's been sentenced to just 80 months in prison.
This TikToker who was a drug queen was just brutally executed in broad daylight. This is Sabrina Duran, who is a notorious drug dealer, narco queen, and TikTok influencer. Earlier this week, she was ambushed by a group of individuals who were covering their face, where they shot her multiple times, leaving her for dead, and then took her car. This is definitely cartel violence, and her death was a repercussion of something that we would probably never know. Sabrina was also released from prison about a month ago, having served a portion of her sentence involving a drug trafficking charge. And I'm guessing she either talked to somebody on the inside or they just didn't trust her anymore. The video of her being executed in broad daylight is going viral, and I'm about to explain it. It opens up with her already laying in the middle of the street, having been shot a couple times, and one of the men is grabbing her things out of her pockets. As he gets back in the car, you see Sabrina moving around like some sort of doll. It seems she can't move some parts of her body because she just got shot, and she's struggling to get up and make contact with these men. This goes on for a couple more seconds, and then the men in the car go in front of her and park it, and one of the men then gets out of the car and shoots Sabrina multiple more times, killing her on the spot. They then get back in the car and just leave her dead body in the middle of the street. This video is absolutely sickening, and I'm just waiting for more information to come out about it because it just happened. Whatever you do, don't go searching for the video because it is pretty disturbing. And hopefully within the next couple days there's more information I could cover and make another video about this.
This is Nicola Priest, a TikToker that was convicted of murdering her own 3-year-old daughter. So back in 2020, Nicola was an active TikTok user. She was constantly posting videos with her daughter, just sharing these fun moments in life of her and her daughter giggling, and she frequently posted videos of she and her daughter dancing. Lots of videos just like these. But on August 9th, 2020, this story takes a sharp and disturbing turn. On that day, Nicola and her boyfriend, Callum Redfern, were in their apartment, and 3-year-old Kaylee Jade Priest did not want to go to bed. Nicola and Caleb were really trying to do the dirty deed, if you know what I mean, but Kaylee Jade would not go to sleep. She kept coming into their room, bothering them. And for some reason, the fact that Kaylee Jade would not go to sleep awakened some sort of primal rage within the two of them. So that evening inside of their home, the two of them beat Kaylee Jade to death together. When her body was found, Kaylee had severe abdominal and chest injuries, and according to investigators, she had been assaulted for a prolonged period of time, meaning she suffered before she died. So after the murder, neighbors came forward and claimed that they had seen Nicola abusing her daughter in public. They had seen her slap and punch her, so nobody can assume or even know what was going on behind closed doors that entire time. But what did Nicola do after her daughter's death? Well, she thought she was in the free and clear, and she immediately in the months afterwards started posting tons of TikTok videos, including this one. Yes, this is a real video where she pretends to care about her daughter's death. Eventually, though, after Kaylee's autopsy and some detective work, investigators were able to determine that she wasn't dead from some sort of accident. Her own mother and her boyfriend had killed her. And so the two of them were sentenced to prison terms. Now, the sad thing about this whole story is that Nicola was only sentenced to 15 years in prison. And this was back in 2020, so that means in just 12 years, she'll be out on the streets again in England. I can't fathom how you only get 15 years for murdering your own innocent 3-year-old daughter. It's just beyond me. But yeah, this case just is so sad. It has no happy ending for anybody involved.
This is how two true crime podcast fans helped a man wrongfully imprisoned for murder. It was June 2021, and married couple Harley and Michael Girk were spending many hours travelling in the car. To pass the time on their journeys, they were listening to true crime podcasts. Specifically, they started enjoying the Crime Junkie podcast. It was through this podcast that they actually were introduced to the case of the 1981 murder of Father Patrick Ryan. Father Patrick had been brutally murdered at a motel in Odessa. After listening to the podcast, they found out that a man named James Rios was convicted of the crime, but it was a controversial ruling. The evidence was extremely weak. James was an unemployed hitchhiker at the time of the murder. When the murder actually took place, James, who had befriended the priest, was in New Mexico. Now, James had seen the priest on the night in question, but when the man was murdered, James was out of town. He even had proof of this. He had petrol receipts and even a speeding fine. The killing went unsolved, but a year later, a drunk James, who was feeling extremely guilty for hitching a ride with the priest on the night in question, actually rang police. In his drunken state, he felt he was guilty for the murder for getting a ride with him. In his phone call with police, he confessed to feeling guilty for this. Although he recanted his statement when he sobered up, it was too late. He was convicted and sentenced to 38 years in prison. Luckily, Michael, who was listening to the podcast about this case, just so happened to be the son of the chief of police in Odessa. The couple decided to see how they could help. They got Michael's dad to reread the case file, and he agreed that there was not enough evidence for a conviction. Thanks to advancements in technology, fingerprints from the original crime scene were actually found to be matches of 3 men who had since passed away. No fingerprints of James were found at the scene. Now, James actually had been released from prison in 1995, but still had a murder conviction on his record. Thankfully, due to the 2 true crime fans, this was about to change. The Innocence Project of Texas got involved, and James was determined to be innocent. He will receive $80,000 in restitution for spending 24 years in prison. He told the press that it was the best day of his life.
This is the tragic and sick case of Gabriel Fernandez, and this is a massive trigger warning. This is 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, who was born and raised in Palmdale, California. And he was abused and tortured over a period of months by his own mother and her boyfriend. Gabriel lived with his grandparents until 2012, when his mother, Pearl Fernandez, regained custody of him despite concerns for his well-being from the family. And throughout his 8-month stay in the household of his mother, Pearl, and her boyfriend, he was systematically tortured and abused. The abuse included regular physical beatings causing broken bones. He was also being forced to eat cat litter and feces, his own vomit, and spoiled or expired foods. He was being burned with cigarettes and heated spoons, being shot with BB guns in various areas of his body, including the face and his groin. They also pepper sprayed him, forced him to wear women's clothing, and had him sleep bounded and gagged in a small cupboard. His teeth were also knocked out with a baseball bat. And according to Gabriel's siblings, when Gabriel's mother and her boyfriend were abusing him, they would just laugh about it. Prosecutors said that Gabriel's mother and boyfriend were motivated to abuse him because they believed he was gay. On May 22, 2013, Pearl Fernandez called 911 reporting that her child Gabriel was not breathing. Gabriel was fatally beaten by his mother and her boyfriend after failing to clean up his toys. When first responders arrived, they found him on the ground naked with several injuries. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital where doctors declared him brain dead. He died 2 days later on May 24, 2013 at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. He died at just the young age of 8 years old, and the official autopsy declared he died from blunt force trauma that coincided with neglect and malnutrition. Gabriel's mother was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and her boyfriend was sentenced to death. This is definitely one of the most sickening cases you would ever hear about or read about. I can't imagine the pain and trauma Gabriel Fernandez was going through while being tortured by his mother and her boyfriend. And this was just complete abuse. They were treating Gabriel like he wasn't even human. I wish the mother got the death penalty too, but life in prison is not good either. But rest in peace to Gabriel Fernandez, and this case is absolutely sickening. This is the murder of James Bulger, one of the most heartbreaking true crime cases ever. This is James Bulger, and he was a 2-year-old toddler living in Liverpool, England with his parents. And on February 12, 1993, he was abducted from a shopping mall in Bootle, Merseyside. His father briefly let go of his hand while they were at the mall, and John Venables and Robert Thompson, who were both 10 years old at the time, approached James and lured him away. The abduction was caught on security cameras right here, and the footage showed the 2 boys leading James away. And after abducting James, John Venables and Robert Thompson took him on a harrowing journey through various locations in Liverpool, during which they subjected him to severe physical and emotional abuse. And you won't believe what these two 10-year-olds did to this 2-year-old boy. They took James to train tracks where they threw blue paint into his eyes, kicked him, stomped on him, threw bricks and stones at him. They placed batteries in his mouth and may have inserted them into his anus, although none were found there. They dropped a 22-pound fish plate on his head. They hit him in the head with a metal bar countless times, which caused 10 skull fractures. James Bulger suffered so many injuries, 42 in total, that none could be identified as the fatal blow. Thompson and Venables then laid James across the railroad tracks and weighted his head down with rubble, hoping that a train would hit him and his death would be ruled as an accident. After that, they left the scene, and James Bulger's body was then cut in half by the train. James's severed body was discovered by a group of children 2 days later, and the forensics testified that James Bulger died before he was struck by the train. John Venables and Robert Thompson were charged with the abduction, torture, and murder of James Bulger. The case received widespread media attention and was deeply emotional and a controversial trial. The boys were found guilty of the charges, and they were initially sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which allowed them to be held in custody for as long as necessary. They were sent to separate secure juvenile facilities but were eventually released on lifelong parole as young adults. The James Bulger case remains one of the most distressing and tragic true crime stories. Every time I come across this case, it just never sits right with me. I can never understand how these two 10-year-old boys could just take a 2-year-old boy away from his parents and then proceed to brutally torture him and kill him. This case is just sickening, and let me know your thoughts on it.
This shocking case will put you off ever trick-or-treating again. Timothy O'Brien from Texas was just 8 years old on October the 31st, 1974. That evening, to celebrate Halloween, Timothy's dad Ronald took Timothy and his sister Elizabeth out trick-or-treating for the evening. Timothy's mum stayed at home while the trio went out that night. They visited one house, but the occupant didn't open the door. The two excited children ran on ahead to try another door while Ronald stayed behind. He reappeared shortly after and told his children that the owner of the house had opened the door and gave him some sweets. He showed the two children the pixie sticks that he had got from the owner. Once the trio had finished trick-or-treating, Ronald gave 3 other children the sweets in question and 1 each to both of his children. Before bed, Timothy tucked into the sweet that his dad had given him. Worryingly, he started saying that he had a really bad stomach and that the sweet tasted very bitter. The little boy started violently vomiting and convulsing. Tragically, he died on the way to hospital. Understandably, Timothy's death caused concern in the community. Who on earth would poison Halloween sweets? The autopsy revealed that Timothy had consumed a fatal dose of potassium cyanide. Local police started to gather up uneaten sweets from the local area. Luckily, this included the pixie sticks that Ronald had given to the children. It turned out that all 5 of the pixie sticks had been cut open and filled with the substance and resealed. One child even had a very narrow escape when they intended to eat the sweet but couldn't open the top. Police started to become suspicious of Ronald when they discovered that none of the houses that had trick-or-treaters that evening claimed to have given out pixie sticks. Ronald stuck with his story that these pixie sticks were from the house that they'd knocked originally and hadn't answered. He said a short time later, the lights were still off in the house and the door was cracked open just a tiny bit and a hand reached out and gave him the sweets. Now, the home in question, it was discovered, was actually owned by a professional air traffic controller who provided proof that he was at work at time of the trick-or-treating. Police then discovered that Ronald was in huge debt and his car was about to be repossessed. He'd also suspiciously taken out life insurance policies on his 2 children just months before Timothy's death. Ronald also callously called the life insurance company to make a claim just 1 day after Timothy had died. The nail in the coffin for Ronald was that police proved that he had visited a chemical supply store in Houston to buy cyanide just before Halloween. Ronald was found guilty of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. His wife divorced him, and when she remarried, the new husband adopted Elizabeth. Ronald was given the death sentence and was executed in 1984.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What?
This TikToker tried to stab and kill her own boyfriend, and she's become an infamous celebrity because of it. So this is Yuka Takeoka. She was born in 1998 in Japan, and there isn't much known about her early life, but eventually she worked her way up to become a manager at a hostess club in Japan. So Yuka seemed to be a completely normal girl. She was working a normal job, but in 2018 she met her future boyfriend, Phoenix Luna. Now, Phoenix was a worker at a different bar and nightclub in Tokyo, and immediately these two seemed to fall deeply in love. They would post TikToks together, and Yuka grew a following here on TikTok. But this story takes a dramatic and disturbing twist. So on May 23rd, 2019, when Phoenix was in the bathroom, Yuka took a look at his cell phone. He had come home 3 hours late that day due to work obligations, and Yuka took that as a sign that he may have been cheating. And when Yuka went through his phone, she found photos of him serving girls at the nightclub, which she interpreted as him cheating on her, when in reality, he was just doing his job. So on that fateful night, Yuka waited until about 3:50 in the morning to ensure that Phoenix was fully asleep. She then walked into the kitchen of their apartment, grabbed the sharpest knife that she could find. She then walked into the bedroom, sat on Phoenix's lap, and pushed the knife as hard as she could into his abdomen. Now immediately Phoenix got up screaming. He ran into the hallway, and he was trying to make it to the elevator when he collapsed. Now, Yuka later stated that she became then very sad, and she said that she wanted Phoenix to die, but that she also wanted to die in that moment herself. So she brought his bloody corpse down to the lobby of the apartment building, and the police were called. This led to a very infamous photo that circulated the internet. I can't post it here, but in the photo, Yuka is sitting there on her phone, smoking a cigarette, and she's covered in blood next to Phoenix's body. So Phoenix actually survived the attack, but when social media heard about this, it was set on fire. So people thought that Yuka resembled a real-life yandere, which in anime is a woman who's obsessed with a man, and when she thinks that he's cheating on her or betraying her, she becomes a homicidal maniac obsessed with her lover. And admittedly, that is kind of what happened here. But people have taken this way too far. They are selling shirts with Yuka's photo on it. And there is tons of fan art of that exact picture of her covered in her boyfriend's blood. I mean, there are so many images of this. I cannot believe that people actually sit down, put their pen to paper, and draw this kind of crap. So Phoenix survived, and Yuka was eventually sentenced to a few years in prison for attempted murder. But this once again just goes to show that you can't tell who a person is by their social media. You could be sitting in a bar, posting a funny lip-syncing video, laughing all night, and then later that evening try to stab your boyfriend to death in your apartment.
Bradford's defo the most requested place. You want a case from Bradford, Mush? Here's a case from Bradford. This is Tony Grant, and this is Mohammed Nisar Khan, known as Meggy. In October 2018, 40-year-old Amriz Iqbal was walking along Sanford Road with a friend that's in Bradford Moor. Khan and Grant were driving a Kia Sedona, and they just drove straight at Mr. Iqbal and his friend, killing Mr. Iqbal in the process. I couldn't really find the reason as to why this happened. The motive for it seemed to not exist. Mr. Khan was a criminal, is a criminal, as is Mr. Grant, but couldn't really find out why the attack actually happened or whether it was just a random attack on two people in the road. Mr. Khan was jailed for life, or 26 years, and Mr. Grant was jailed for life, or 17 years. Where should I cover next? You bet I won't find any case from Harrogate. Here's a case from Harrogate. This is Daniel Liam Ainsley of Mayfield Grove in Harrogate. On March 5th, 2020, Daniel killed his 48-year-old friend Mark Walsey. Daniel was taken to hospital before the killing to get more medication. He claimed that Mark had stolen his. After leaving the hospital, he went to Asda, bought a set of knives, took one out of the packet and discarded the rest, went back to his bedsit and stabbed and killed Mark. Mark had suffered 37 wounds, and Daniel had left the knife sticking out of his chest. November 24th, 2021, Daniel was handed a life sentence with a minimum term to serve of 22 years. He initially pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but the jury changed it to guilty of murder. Where should I cover next?
Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind, and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.